1884 California, the Winchester Mansion, 38 years of construction that archives documented to appease the dead. In the heart of San Jose, California, stands one of the most disturbing constructions that American architecture has ever documented. It is not a medieval castle. It is not an abandoned mansion covered in wild vegetation. It is something far more unsettling, a house that never stopped growing. The records of Santa Clara County document an unprecedented architectural phenomenon. Between 1884 and 1922, for 38 consecutive years, the hammers never stopped sounding on the Winchester property. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for nearly 4 decades. When Sarah Lockwood Pardee Winchester died on September 5, 1922, the construction workers dropped their tools exactly where they were. The nails remained half-hammered, the boards unfinished, because after 38 years of continuous work, the order to build had finally ceased. What the executors discovered when inspecting the property was meticulously recorded in the legal documents of the state of California. A 7-story mansion with 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 chimneys, 40 staircases, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. But these numbers, as impressive as they are, do not capture the true nature of the documented architectural horror. Official construction records reveal something that defies all logic. Staircases that end abruptly against the ceiling, doors that open to solid walls, windows installed in the floor, rooms built only to be sealed immediately afterward, hallways that turn 90 degrees for no apparent reason, and doors that open to vertical drops of several stories without balcony or any protection. The municipal architect of San Jose, whose report from 1923 remains archived in the city's historical records, wrote with evident perplexity, "This structure defies all known principles of architectural design. There is no master plan. There is no structural coherence. It is as if multiple architects had worked simultaneously without communicating with each other, each building according to instructions that only they could hear." But Sarah Winchester was not insane. She was one of the wealthiest women in the United States, heir to a fortune estimated at $20 million of that era, equivalent to more than $500 million current dollars according to Treasury Department archives. Her fortune came from a very specific source: the Winchester rifle, the gun that won the West. Official genealogical documents establish the facts with brutal clarity. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born on September 13, 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. On September 12, 1862, she married William Wirt Winchester, only son of Oliver Winchester, founder of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. On June 15, 1866, she gave birth to a girl, Annie Pardee Winchester. What happened next was recorded in death certificates still preserved in Connecticut State Archives. On July 15, 1866, exactly 1 month after her birth, little Annie died. The official diagnosis: marasmus, a form of severe infant malnutrition. Sarah was 27 years old and had just buried her only daughter. 16 years later, on March 25, 1880, William Winchester died of tuberculosis. He was 43 years old. Sarah was widowed at 41, childless, alone with an immense fortune and a surname that represented death to thousands of people. Because the Winchester Model 1873 rifle had killed more people than any other firearm in American history up to that point. Native Americans, Confederate soldiers, settlers, outlaws, wild animals. Military archives document its use in virtually every conflict of the American West. It was called the gun that shoots on Sunday because its lever mechanism allowed 17 shots without reloading. Historical records indicate that Sarah remained in New Haven for 2 years after her husband's death, immersed in a depression that deeply concerned her family. But something changed drastically in 1882. Archive travel documents show that Sarah Winchester traveled to Boston, Massachusetts, where she consulted Adam Coons, a spiritualist medium very well known in New England high society. There are no direct records of that specific session, but what happened immediately afterward was meticulously documented in public archives. In 1884, Sarah Winchester purchased an unfinished 8-room farmhouse in San Jose, California. The purchase price, $3,500, officially recorded in county archives. The property had 17 acres of land. And then the construction began. And it never stopped. The nearest neighbors, whose statements were recorded in archived newspaper interviews from the San Jose Mercury News of the early 20th century, described the same disturbing phenomenon: the constant sound of hammers, saws, and construction. Day and night. On Christmas. On New Year's. During storms. During droughts. The work never ceased. Henrietta Severs, who lived on an adjacent property, declared to the newspaper in 1914, "I have lived here for 25 years and never, not a single night, has there been complete silence coming from that house. There is always someone building something. Sometimes I wake up at 3 in the morning and hear hammering. It is unnatural." Construction employment records, partially preserved in San Jose Historical Archives, show that Sarah Winchester maintained teams of between 10 and 20 carpenters working in rotating shifts. She paid them triple the normal salary of the era, documented in surviving accounting books. But there were strange conditions. John Hanson, construction foreman who worked on the property for 12 years, gave an interview to the San Francisco Chronicle in 1918, 3 years before his death. His words were archived. "Mrs. Winchester never gave us complete plans. Each morning we received instructions to build a room, a staircase, a door. The next day she often ordered us to dismantle what we had just finished and rebuild it in another direction. She said the spirits had indicated it was wrong. But the most disturbing thing, according to Hanson, was the blue room. No one could enter there except Mrs. Winchester," Hanson declared. "Every night, exactly at midnight, she locked herself in that room. We could hear sounds as if she were talking to multiple people. But we knew she was completely alone. This happened every night, without exception. She remained there until 2 in the morning, and then came out with new construction instructions for the next day." San Jose Municipal Archives document something else. Between 1884 and 1906, Sarah Winchester requested exactly 0 construction permits. The expansion of the house was completely chaotic, without government supervision, without inspections, without official approvals. It simply grew. And then, on April 18, 1906, nature intervened catastrophically. At 5:13 in the morning, the Great San Francisco earthquake shook the entire Bay Area region. Seismological records document a magnitude of 7.9. In San Jose, the damage was extensive, and the Winchester mansion suffered a catastrophic partial collapse. The San Jose Daily Mercury published in its edition of April 20, 1906, "Mrs. Winchester's eccentric mansion has lost its top 3 floors. The structure, already strange before the earthquake, now presents an even more disturbing appearance with rooms exposed to the elements and staircases that end abruptly in the void." But what Sarah Winchester did next was documented in construction records. Instead of repairing the damage according to the original architectural plans, she permanently sealed 30 rooms in the damaged section of the house. They were walled up with bricks and wood, and they were never opened again during her lifetime. Construction workers later declared that Sarah believed the earthquake had been a punishment from the spirits for having built too high, for having gotten too close to the sky. From that moment on, construction continued exclusively in horizontal directions and downward, adding basements and underground passages. Thomas Jefferson Steele, a carpenter who worked at the mansion between 1908 and 1918, provided a sworn statement archived in county records during a minor labor litigation in 1919. In it he described, "I have built 11 staircases that end in solid ceilings. I have installed 47 doors that lead nowhere. I have sealed windows we had just installed. I have built rooms within rooms." And when we asked why, Mrs. Winchester simply said, "The spirits require it." She was not an insane woman. She was a terrified woman. Because Sarah Winchester, according to multiple archive testimonies, believed she was being pursued by something very specific: the spirits of all the people killed by Winchester rifles. And the only way to keep them confused, to prevent them from finding her, was to build a house so labyrinthine, so illogical, so impossible to navigate, that not even ghosts could reach her. The continuous construction was not an architectural eccentricity. It was a survival strategy against the dead. And every hammer blow, every new room, every staircase to nowhere, was a desperate attempt by a woman with unlimited fortune to escape a curse that bore her late husband's surname. The archives document 38 years of this architectural terror. But the archives also document that Sarah Winchester never stopped believing she was being pursued, until her last breath. To understand the magnitude of the horror that consumed Sarah Winchester, it is necessary to understand who she was before tragedy shattered her life. Genealogical archives and historical records from New Haven, Connecticut, paint the portrait of an extraordinary woman trapped in an era that did not value her intellect. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born into a respectable upper-middle-class New England family. Census records from 1840 document Leonard Pardee, her father, as a prosperous carpenter and builder who would eventually become one of New Haven's most successful businessmen. Her mother, Sarah Burns, came from a distinguished family of merchants. But what makes Sarah truly remarkable in historical archives is her education. Records from the Young Ladies Collegiate Institute of New Haven, one of New England's most prestigious private schools, confirm that Sarah Pardee attended between 1852 and 1856. This was extraordinarily unusual for a woman of her era. Archived academic documents reveal that Sarah mastered 4 languages: English, French, Spanish, and Italian. She was an accomplished pianist, a fact documented in multiple recital programs archived at the New Haven Historical Society. But her true passion, according to personal letters preserved in the Pardee family archives, was architecture and mathematics. In a letter dated March 14, 1858, addressed to her younger sister Mary Converse Pardee, Sarah wrote, "I have spent the afternoon studying the plans for Yale's new library. The geometry of its proportions is absolutely fascinating. If I had been born a man, I would have studied architecture formally. But being a woman, I must content myself with admiring the work of others." This Sarah, brilliant, cultured, frustrated by the limitations of her gender, was completely different from the woman who decades later would order the construction of staircases to nowhere. William Wirt Winchester entered her life in 1861. Engagement announcements archived in the New Haven Register describe William as a young gentleman of excellent family and promising commercial prospects. He was the only son of Oliver Fisher Winchester, who at that time was transforming the Volcanic Repeating Arms Company into what would become the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Official marriage records of the state of Connecticut document that Sarah Lockwood Pardee and William Wirt Winchester were married on September 12, 1862 in a private ceremony at the First Congregational Church of New Haven. Sarah was 22 years old. William was 27. The first years of marriage, according to archived family letters, were apparently happy. The couple moved to an elegant house on Prospect Street, one of New Haven's most prestigious addresses. Property tax documents from 1863 show that the house was a gift from Oliver Winchester to the young couple. The family business prospered exponentially. Commercial archives document that the Winchester Model 1866 rifle became a massive commercial success during the American Civil War. The Union government placed massive orders, documented in military contracts archived at the National Archives. The Winchester family fortune grew astronomically. And then on June 15, 1866, Sarah gave birth to a girl. The official birth certificate, archived in Connecticut Vital Records, documents, Annie Pardee Winchester, born at 11:45 in the morning, birth weight, 6 pounds 4 ounces. Mother, Sarah L. Winchester. Father, William W. Winchester. Sarah's letters to her family during that month, preserved in the Pardee archives, overflow with maternal joy. In a letter dated June 23, 1866, just 8 days after the birth, Sarah wrote to her sister, "Annie is perfect in every way. She has William's eyes and my nose. She nurses well and sleeps peacefully. We are blessed beyond words." But something was terribly wrong. Annie Pardee Winchester's death certificate, archived in Connecticut State Records, documents the death date, July 15, 1866. Exactly 1 month after her birth. Cause of death, infant marasmus. Marasmus was a 19th century medical term to describe a severe form of malnutrition and physical deterioration in infants. But modern medical historians who have reviewed the archived records suggest that Annie probably suffered from what today would be known as an undiagnosed congenital malformation that prevented proper nutrient absorption. There are no direct records of how Sarah reacted to this devastating loss. What is documented is a disturbing silence in her correspondence. Between July 1866 and March 1868, there is not a single letter from Sarah Winchester in the family archives. Almost 2 years of complete silence. The first letter that reappears, dated March 8, 1868, is brief and reveals deep pain. Each day is an effort of will. The house is too quiet. The rooms we prepared for Annie remain closed. I cannot bear to look at them. The Winchester family's private medical records, partially preserved in the archives of the New Haven Historical Society, indicate that Sarah consulted multiple doctors in the following years. She wanted answers. She wanted to know why she had lost her daughter. But 1860 medicine had no answers to offer. Winchester Company documents show that William immersed himself in the family business. Between 1867 and 1870, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company expanded its operations dramatically. The Winchester Model 1873 rifle, documented in archived commercial catalogs, became the best-selling weapon of the American West. But tragedy had not yet finished with the Winchester family. Archived medical records from New Haven General Hospital document that William Wirt Winchester was admitted on January 20, 1880 with a diagnosis of advanced pulmonary tuberculosis. At that time, tuberculosis was practically a death sentence. For 2 months, Sarah cared for her dying husband. Hospital records show daily visits without exception. Medical staff in archived notes described Mrs. Winchester as devotedly attentive, though visibly consumed by despair. William Wirt Winchester's official death certificate, archived in state records documents, date of death, March 25, 1880. Time, 4:35 in the morning. Cause, pulmonary tuberculosis. Age, 43 years. Sarah Winchester, at 41 years old, had lost her only daughter and her husband. She was completely alone. But she was not financially helpless. William Winchester's will, archived in Connecticut state probate records, left Sarah an astonishing inheritance. The legal documents specify approximately $20 million in cash, securities and properties, plus a 50% shareholding in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, generating an approximate income of $1,000 daily. $1,000 daily in 1880 was equivalent to approximately $30,000 current dollars daily, according to calculations by economic historians. Sarah Winchester was one of the wealthiest women in the United States. But money could not buy what she had lost. Records from New Haven High Society, documented in archived social columns of the New Haven Register, show that Sarah withdrew almost completely from public life after William's death. The few documented appearances describe her as a mourning and silent figure, and visibly consumed by grief. Isabella Merriman, Sarah's childhood friend, wrote in her personal diary, now archived at the New Haven Historical Society, an entry dated July 12, 1880, I visited Sarah today. I found her in a state of profound melancholy. She speaks little, and when she does, it is only about Annie and William. I fear for her mental health. She confided something disturbing to me. She believes her family is cursed. She says the Winchester name carries blood, and that blood now claims the Winchesters themselves. This is the first documented mention of the idea of a Winchester curse in historical archives. During the following 2 years, Sarah remained in New Haven, living in the Prospect Street house, now too large and too silent. Tax records show that she maintained the property impeccably, but neighbors in later archived testimonies noticed increasingly unusual behaviors. Margaret Foster, who lived in the adjacent house, declared in an interview from 1923, 1 year after Sarah's death, during those years in New Haven before she moved to California, Mrs. Winchester developed strange nocturnal habits. We often saw her walking in the garden at midnight talking to herself. Or at least that's what we thought. She seemed to be having complete conversations with nothing. Archived travel records and railway manifests show that in 1882, Sarah Winchester made multiple trips to Boston, Massachusetts. Historians have confirmed that during this period, Boston was a major center of the spiritualist movement in the United States. Spiritualism had gained enormous popularity after the Civil War, when thousands of families sought to contact their dead loved ones. Mediums, clairvoyants, and communicators with the dead prospered. And Sarah Winchester, desperate for answers, sought solace in this world. Historical records document that Adam Coons was one of Boston's most prestigious mediums in 1882. He attended exclusively to high society clients. There are no transcripts of Sarah's sessions with Coons, but what happened immediately afterward is meticulously documented. In 1884, Sarah Winchester sold the Prospect Street house. Real estate transaction records show a quick sale, below market value, as if she were in a hurry to leave. She purchased a train ticket bound for California. Transcontinental Railroad passenger manifests, archived at the National Archives, confirm. Sarah L. Winchester, 44 years old, from New Haven, Connecticut, bound for San Jose, California. Departure date, March 17, 1884. Sarah never returned to New Haven. She never saw her family again. According to later archived letters, she broke practically all contact with her previous life, because something had fundamentally changed during those spiritualist sessions in Boston. Something that convinced her she needed to flee to the other end of the country. Something that convinced her that her only salvation was to build, and never stop building. In one of the few letters Sarah sent to her family after moving to California, dated June 20, 1884 and archived in the Pardee records, she wrote a single cryptic line, "I have found my purpose. I must build for those who are no longer here. It is the only way to find peace." Santa Clara County deed records document that on May 3, 1884, Sarah Winchester purchased a partially constructed farmhouse in rural San Jose. 8 rooms, 17 acres, $3,500. It began as a modest house. In 38 years, it would become an architectural labyrinth of 160 rooms that would defy all logic and reason. Because Sarah Winchester was not building a house. She was building a prison for ghosts, and she herself was the jailer who could never rest. Santa Clara County construction records document that the transformation of the modest 8-room farmhouse began immediately after purchase. But what those records cannot explain is why Sarah Winchester ordered that construction never stop. The first workers hired, whose names appear in payroll books partially preserved in San Jose Historical Archives, were a team of 6 local carpenters led by James Perkins, a respected builder in the community. In an interview granted to the San Jose Evening News in 1911, Perkins, already retired, described his first impressions. "When Mrs. Winchester hired me in May 1884, I thought it was a normal expansion job," Perkins declared. "She showed me some basic sketches to add 4 additional rooms and a second floor. It seemed like a simple 6-month project. I worked for her for 17 years. And in those 17 years, I never saw a day when construction stopped completely." Archived payment records show something extraordinary. Sarah Winchester paid her workers $3 daily when the average salary of a carpenter in California was $1.50 daily. But there was an unusual condition documented in employment contracts. Workers had to be available 24 hours a day, organized in 3 8-hour shifts. During the first months, according to Perkins, the work seemed relatively normal. Enlargement of existing rooms. Construction of a second floor. Installation of new windows. But in September 1884, just 4 months after construction began, something changed drastically. Mrs. Winchester arrived one morning with completely new instructions, Perkins recalled in his archived interview. "She ordered us to stop all work on the second floor and begin building a completely new addition on the east side of the house. When I asked about architectural plans, she said there were no plans, that we would receive day-to-day instructions. I thought it was eccentric, but the salary was too good to refuse." The nearest neighbors began to notice the strange patterns almost immediately. Census records from 1880 show that the nearest properties were approximately a quarter-mile away, close enough to hear, but far enough not to see clearly. Samuel Hopkins, who owned an adjacent vegetable farm, provided detailed testimony to the San Jose Mercury Herald in 1906 during earthquake coverage. From the first year Mrs. Winchester arrived, there was constant construction noise. At first I didn't pay attention. I thought she was simply renovating the old farmhouse. But after 6 months, then a year, then 2 years, the hammering never ceased. My wife and I got used to sleeping with that constant background sound. But Hopkins described something more disturbing. Sometimes late at night, we would hear the hammering stop abruptly. Total silence for perhaps 20 or 30 minutes. And then, from the Winchester house, we would hear bells. Multiple bells ringing at the same time. 13 chimes, always 13. And then the hammering would start again immediately afterward. Historical archives confirm that Sarah Winchester installed an elaborate bell system throughout the property. House inventories conducted after her death document the presence of service bells connected by cables to practically all main rooms. But Sarah's use of them was different from the traditional purpose of calling servants. Mary Jo Ignafo, historian whose book Captive of the Labyrinth, from 2010 is based extensively on public archives, cites documents from workers describing how Sarah used the bells to communicate during her nocturnal spiritualist sessions. The bells rang at midnight, signaling the beginning of her communication with spirits. They rang again at 2 in the morning, signaling the end. And workers knew that at dawn they would receive new construction instructions based on what the spirits had dictated during the night. Construction material purchase records, partially preserved in San Jose Historical Supplier Archives, reveal a puzzling pattern. Between 1885 and 1888, Sarah Winchester ordered massive quantities of wood, nails, glass, and construction materials. But the quantities did not correspond with the visible growth of the structure. Thomas Bowman, owner of Bowman Lumber Company, declared in a legal deposition from 1892 archived in county records, "Mrs. Winchester was my best customer by far. Every month she ordered enough wood to build 2 complete houses. But when I passed by her property, the house didn't seem to be growing proportionally to the materials she was buying. I wondered for years what she was doing with all that wood." The answer, documented later, was disturbing. Sarah frequently ordered the construction of complete rooms, furnished them, and then had them permanently sealed. Build to destroy. Create to bury. In 1887, 3 years after construction began, the house had grown from 8 rooms to approximately 25. But workers began to report experiences they could not rationally explain. Joseph Ramos, a young 19-year-old carpenter hired in 1887, wrote a letter to his brother in Mexico dated October 14, 1887, now archived in the California Historical Society collection. In it he described, "This job pays me very well, but there are things that happen here that I cannot understand. Yesterday I was installing door frames in the new East Wing. I had placed my tools in an empty room, and when I returned 5 minutes later, all the tools were arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the room. No one else was working in that section. I asked the other men, but they were all in different parts of the house." Ramos continued, "And there are sounds. When we work the night shift, sometimes we hear footsteps in rooms we know are empty. We hear doors closing when there are no air currents. Once, 3 of us clearly heard a woman's voice singing on the 3rd floor, but when we went up to investigate, there was no one. Mrs. Winchester was in her private room on the 1st floor. I don't understand it, but I need the money." Santa Clara County Court records document that in 1888, a carpenter named Frederick Miller sued Sarah Winchester for unpaid wages. In his sworn testimony, Miller described why he had left the job abruptly. "I was working alone in the attic one March night when I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder. I turned around and there was absolutely no one there. The temperature in that room dropped so dramatically that I could see my own breath, despite it being a mild night. I abandoned my tools and left. I have not returned." The case was eventually settled out of court, documented in legal records, with Sarah paying Miller double the owed wages. But significantly, Miller never retracted his statements about his experiences. By 1890, the mansion had grown to approximately 40 rooms, and rumors in San Jose began to circulate extensively. Archived newspaper articles from the San Jose Daily Mercury of that period show growing public interest in the strange widow Winchester and her endless house. An article dated July 28, 1890 describes, "The Winchester property on the outskirts of our city continues to be the subject of considerable local speculation. Construction, which began 6 years ago, shows no signs of concluding. Local residents report hearing construction at all hours of day and night. Mrs. Winchester, a woman of considerable fortune, is rarely seen in town, and maintains an extraordinarily reclusive existence." But the documented phenomena were not limited to construction workers' experiences. Local suppliers' delivery records reveal equally puzzling patterns. George Mitchell, who operated a home food delivery service, provided an archived statement to the San Jose Evening News in 1903. "I delivered provisions to the Winchester mansion weekly for 15 years. I had strict instructions to leave supplies at the back door and ring the bell 3 times. I should never attempt to enter. Once in 1891 the back door was ajar. I rang the bell as usual, but there was no response. I waited several minutes, then pushed the door open a bit more to call out. What I saw left me frozen." Mitchell continued, "The hallway behind that back door led nowhere. Literally. After approximately 10 feet there was a solid wall. No door, no turn, no exit. It was a hallway built only to exist, with no functional purpose whatsoever. I backed away immediately. Mrs. Winchester appeared moments later from a different door, paid me, and asked that I never mention what I had seen. I gave her my word, but now that years have passed, I feel others should know the truly strange nature of that house." San Jose Post Office archives document another disturbing aspect of Sarah Winchester's life. Between 1885 and 1920, Sarah received regular correspondence from multiple spiritualist mediums from across the country. Postal records show frequent letters from Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. Henrietta Severs, the neighbor whose earlier testimony was cited, provided additional details in an extensive interview from 1916 archived in local newspapers. Mrs. Winchester received visitors, but they were always of the same type. People dressed peculiarly, often completely in black, arrived in carriages after nightfall. Sometimes we heard strange chanting coming from the house during those visits. They were not normal Christian religious chants. They were something different. Something that sounded ancient and in languages we did not recognize. Hiring records show that Sarah employed a small domestic staff, generally between 5 and 7 people simultaneously. But staff turnover was extraordinarily high, documented in payroll books. Most servants did not last more than 6 months. One of the few exceptions was Henrietta Severs, unrelated to neighbor Henrietta Severs, who worked as housekeeper for Sarah for nearly 8 years, from 1893 to 1901. After her retirement, Sivers provided one of the most detailed descriptions of life inside the mansion in a series of interviews to the San Francisco Call in 1913, now archived. Mrs. Winchester had very specific rules, Sivers explained. No one could enter the Blue Room. That was her private séance room. Every night at 11:45 she retired there. She locked it from inside. Sometimes we heard conversations. She spoke aloud, asked questions, waited as if receiving answers. But we knew with certainty that she was completely alone in that room. Sivers continued with more disturbing details. The house changed constantly. Rooms that existed 1 month were sealed the next. Staircases that led to one place one day, led to a wall the next day. We learned not to trust our memory about the house's layout. It was as if the house itself were alive, constantly reorganizing itself according to some purpose that only Mrs. Winchester understood. Partial surviving architectural records, now in the San Jose Historical Society archives, show fragmentary sketches of the house in different periods. What is remarkable is the lack of any coherent master plan. Each addition seems to have been conceived independently, without consideration of the overall design. By 1895, 11 years after construction began, the house had reached approximately 70 rooms. And the phenomena reported by workers and visitors had intensified significantly. Martin Garcia, carpenter who worked on the property between 1894 and 1898, declared in archive testimony during a minor labor litigation, "On 3 different occasions I saw lights moving in rooms I knew were completely sealed. They were not oil lamp or candle lights. They were lights that moved independently, floating in the air. The first time I thought they were fireflies, but it was winter. The second time I called 2 other workers as witnesses. We all saw it. Orbs of pale light moving in deliberate patterns behind windows of rooms that had been walled up weeks before." Archived medical records from San Jose Hospital document that between 1895 and 1900, at least 7 construction workers from the Winchester mansion were treated for nervous exhaustion and acute anxiety states. The medical notes, written in the terminology of the era, describe patients reporting disturbing visions, sensations of being constantly observed, and recurring nightmares about the Winchester property. Dr. Edwin Goodfellow, who attended several of these patients, wrote in his private medical notes, now archived in the county medical history collection, "It is remarkable that multiple men with no connection to each other except their employment at the Winchester mansion report similar phenomena. They speak of sensations of extreme cold in specific rooms, of hearing whispers when alone, of feeling invisible presences. As a physician, I seek rational explanations, but the consistency of these reports is difficult to ignore." Sarah Winchester herself provided very few public explanations about the nature of her endless construction. Newspaper interview records are scarce, as she rejected most press requests. But there is one notable interview, granted to the San Francisco Examiner in 1897, archived in the newspaper's library. When asked directly why she continued building ceaselessly, Sarah responded cryptically, "Construction must continue. When it ceases, there are consequences. Those who wait become restless. I maintain construction not by whim but by necessity. There are contracts we must honor, agreements that transcend this visible world." The interviewer, clearly puzzled, pressed for clarification. Sarah added, "Every person who dies by a Winchester rifle adds their weight to my family's debt. Construction is the payment. Each room, each hallway, each staircase is an offering. As long as I build, I am protected. If I stop, they find me." This is one of the few documented public statements by Sarah Winchester that explicitly explains her belief that she was being pursued by the spirits of those killed by her family's weapons. Estimated population records of deaths caused by Winchester rifles, based on military documents and archived historical studies, suggest that by the end of the 19th century, Winchester weapons had been involved in tens of thousands of deaths. Indian wars, frontier conflicts, the Civil War, individual homicides, hunting. The Winchester rifle was the defining weapon of American westward expansion. And Sarah Winchester, heir to that blood-stained fortune, believed that each of those souls pursued her. By 1900, the mansion had become a labyrinth of more than 100 rooms. Workers had learned to never question instructions, however illogical they seemed. Build staircases to the ceiling. Install doors 3 feet off the ground. Create windows that faced interior walls. Seal newly completed rooms. Each impossible architectural element was, according to Sarah, a trap for spirits. A design to confuse the ghosts that pursued her. A labyrinth meant to protect her from the dead seeking revenge. But the documented paranormal phenomena did not diminish with each new addition. If anything, they intensified. And on April 18, 1906, nature itself would intervene in a way that Sarah would interpret as an unmistakable message from the spirits. An earthquake that would change both California's geology and the architecture of Sarah Winchester's madness. On April 18, 1906, at 5:13 in the morning, the earth shook with a violence that would forever change California's psychological geography. Seismological records archived at the United States Geological Survey document the Great San Francisco earthquake with an estimated magnitude of 7.9 on the Richter scale, although that scale had not yet been invented at that time. In San Jose, approximately 48 miles south of the epicenter, the effects were devastating. Archived municipal reports document the collapse of 14 commercial buildings in downtown, severe damage to the Church of Santa Clara, and massive cracks in numerous residential structures. But no structure in San Jose suffered a stranger fate than the Winchester Mansion. The San Jose Daily Mercury published in its emergency edition of April 20, 1906, now archived in the California Historical Library, the eccentric mansion of Widow Winchester has suffered catastrophic damage. The top 3 floors of the main tower have collapsed completely. Multiple chimneys have fallen. Entire sections of the structure have collapsed upon themselves. Miraculously, Mrs. Winchester survived, though she was briefly trapped in one of the rooms. The details of that morning were documented by multiple witnesses. James Perkins, the construction foreman, provided detailed testimony to the newspaper several days later. I arrived at the property approximately at 6 in the morning, an hour after the main earthquake. The house was unrecognizable. What had been a 7-story structure was now a chaos of collapsed beams, sunken roofs, and crumbled walls. I immediately searched for Mrs. Winchester. Perkins continued, "We found her in what had been the Daisy bedroom, her personal room in the east wing. A beam had fallen and blocked the door from the outside. She was trapped but unharmed. When we finally managed to open the door, I expected her to be hysterical. Instead, she was completely calm, almost serene. Her first words were, 'The spirits are displeased. I built too high. I tried to touch the sky, and the dead have punished me for my arrogance.'" Structural damage records, documented by San Jose municipal inspectors in the weeks following the earthquake, reveal the true magnitude of the destruction. Archived official reports describe total collapse of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th floors of the main tower, destruction of approximately 30 rooms, severe damage to 47 chimneys, multiple staircases destroyed, significant structural cracks in the north wing foundations. But what Sarah Winchester ordered done next left both workers and local authorities perplexed. Instead of beginning repairs to restore the mansion to its previous state, Sarah ordered that all damaged rooms in the collapsed section be permanently sealed. Archived construction records show that in the weeks immediately following the earthquake, workers used bricks, wood, and plaster to completely seal approximately 30 rooms that had been partially destroyed. Thomas Garrett, a mason hired specifically for the post-earthquake sealing work, declared to the San Jose Evening News in 1920, "We were ordered to seal those rooms as if we were building tombs. Multiple layers of brick, then wood, then more brick." Mrs. Winchester insisted that no light, no sound, no air should be able to enter or exit those sealed rooms. When I asked why not simply demolish them and rebuild properly, she looked at me with an intensity one will never forget and said, "Those who died there during the earthquake must remain contained. If we open those rooms, we will release something that must not be released." This statement has puzzled historians, as there are no documented records of anyone dying in the mansion during the earthquake. But Sarah clearly believed that something had died, or that something had been trapped in those collapsed rooms. Post-earthquake construction records show a dramatic change in building patterns. From April 1906 onward, all new construction was exclusively horizontal or downward, adding basements and underground levels. Sarah never again built above the 4th floor. John Hanson, who had worked as a carpenter on the property since 1895, described in an archived 1918 interview how the house's atmosphere changed after the earthquake. Before the earthquake, the house was strange, yes, but there was a certain logic to the madness. After the earthquake, everything changed. Mrs. Winchester became obsessed with building downward. We excavated basements beneath basements. We created tunnels connecting different sections of the house underground. And the phenomena we had experienced before intensified dramatically. San Jose Hospital medical records document that between 1906 and 1910, 12 different workers from the Winchester Mansion were treated for what doctors of the era described as acute nervous episodes. Archived medical notes provide disturbing details. A carpenter named Michael Brennan was admitted on August 14, 1907 with what the doctor recorded as extreme state of terror and disorientation. The medical notes indicate, patient insists that while working in the new underground tunnels of the Winchester property, he clearly heard voices calling for help. He followed the voices deeper into the tunnels until he became completely lost. He wandered in darkness for what he estimates were 3 hours before finding an exit. When he emerged, less than 20 minutes had transpired according to other workers. Patient shows signs of severe psychological trauma and temporal disorientation. This incident was not isolated. Records from the era document multiple cases of workers reporting temporal distortions, loss of orientation, and experiences of inexplicable terror in the underground levels of the mansion. Sarah Winchester herself seemed to become more reclusive after the earthquake. Food and supply delivery records show that she began ordering everything by messenger, rejecting practically all direct personal interaction except with her trusted spiritualist mediums. Archived postal records show increased correspondence with mediums from across the country after the earthquake. Particularly notable is a series of letters exchanged with a Boston medium named Madame Estelle Dupree, whose letters to Sarah were eventually donated to historical archives by the Dupree family in 1968. In a letter dated June 3, 1906, Madame Dupree wrote to Sarah, "The spirits have communicated to me their distress about the recent earthquake. They say it was a warning, not a punishment. They say your construction must continue, but must remain close to the earth. The sky belongs to the living. The dead must be honored in the depths. Continue building downward toward where the dead await." This letter correlates perfectly with the documented change in Sarah's construction patterns after the earthquake. By 1908, the mansion had reached approximately 120 rooms, though exact counting had become nearly impossible due to sealed rooms and labyrinthine underground spaces. And workers began to report phenomena that went beyond simple inexplicable lights or strange sounds. Ralph Cortez, a carpenter hired in 1908, kept a personal diary during his employment at the mansion, now archived at the California Historical Society. His entries provide one of the most detailed chronicles of documented paranormal phenomena. Entry from March 22, 1908. Today, while installing window frames in the new West Wing, I clearly saw the figure of a woman standing at the end of the hallway. She wore old-fashioned clothing like from 50 years ago. I looked at her directly for several seconds. Then I blinked and she was gone. She didn't move. She simply stopped being there. I told Hanson, the foreman. He looked at me with a weary expression and said, "You're not the first. You won't be the last. Do your work and don't ask questions." Entry from May 7, 1908. 3 of us today heard what sounded exactly like rifle shots coming from the east attic. We immediately went up to investigate. The attic was completely empty and covered in undisturbed dust. There was no way anyone had been there recently. But all 3 of us clearly heard at least 10 rifle shots. Mrs. Winchester found us in the attic and simply said, "The Winchesters will always be here. The sound of the weapons we created will never completely cease." Then she left without further explanation. Entry from August 19, 1908. Today I experienced something that makes me seriously question whether I should continue this employment, despite the excellent salary. I was working alone in one of the new basements installing beam supports. The temperature dropped so dramatically that my breath became visible. Then I felt unequivocally that someone was standing directly behind me. I could feel the warmth of a body here breathing. I turned around and there was absolutely no one, but the sensation of presence did not disappear. I worked the next 20 minutes constantly feeling that someone was watching me from the shadows. When I finally went upstairs, my hands were shaking so much I could barely hold my tools. Archived staff rotation records and payroll books show that between 1906 and 1910, Sarah Winchester hired more than 50 different carpenters. Most did not last more than 3 to 6 months. Only a small core of long-term workers remained, those who apparently had become accustomed to or resigned to the inexplicable phenomena. Neighbors also reported an escalation in strange activity. San Jose Mercury Herald newspaper archives document multiple articles between 1908 and 1912 about mysterious lights and inexplicable sounds coming from the Winchester mansion. A particularly detailed article from October 12, 1909 describes multiple residents of properties adjacent to the Winchester mansion report having seen strange lights moving through the house's windows during nighttime hours. These lights do not behave like normal oil lamps or candles. They move independently, sometimes appearing simultaneously in multiple windows on different floors, then disappearing completely. When asked about the phenomenon, Mrs. Winchester declined to comment. Archived municipal records show that in 1910, the San Jose Police Department received 3 formal complaints from neighbors about nighttime disturbances coming from the Winchester property. However, when officers investigated, they documented finding no violations of noise ordinances. The police report from the visit of March 23, 1910, archived in department records, indicates, responded to noise complaint at Winchester property. Upon arrival, heard normal construction during daytime hours. Mrs. Winchester received us courteously and explained that she maintains workers 24 hours due to the continuous nature of her renovation projects. Found no ordinance violation. However, noted that the residence presents highly unusual architecture that defies conventional description. By 1911, Sarah Winchester had been building continuously for 27 years. The mansion had become a legendary structure in the San Francisco Bay Area. Newspapers called it the Mystery House, the Palace of Spiritualism, and the Mansion of 1,000 Rooms. But the most disturbing phenomena were yet to be documented. In 1912, Sarah Winchester hired a new housekeeper, a woman named Mary Merriman, unrelated to Sarah's childhood friend from New Haven. Merriman worked at the mansion for nearly 5 years, and after her departure in 1917, she provided one of the most extensive and detailed interviews about life inside the house. In a series of articles published in the San Francisco Chronicle between March and May 1918, now archived, Merriman described experiences that went far beyond the phenomena reported by construction workers. Mrs. Winchester lived according to a schedule dictated completely by the spirits, Merriman explained. Every night, without exception, she performed a spiritualist session in the Blue Room. It began exactly at midnight and ended exactly at 2 in the morning. During that time, no one should be near that section of the house. The few times I passed near the room during her sessions, I heard her voice speaking clearly, asking questions, pausing as if listening to answers. But most disturbing were the other voices. Merriman continued, I heard other voices answering her. Male voices, female voices, even children's voices. They were not imaginations. They were clear and distinct voices. And they came from a room where I knew with absolute certainty that Mrs. Winchester was completely alone. I verified it multiple times. I watched the door before her sessions. She was the only person who entered. She was the only person who exited. But during those 2 hours, multiple voices spoke in that room. Merriman's testimonies were corroborated by other domestic staff members. Archives contain statements from at least 3 different servants who described having heard multiple conversations coming from the Blue Room during Sarah's nightly sessions. Merriman also described Sarah's relationship with food, which followed specific ritualistic patterns. Mrs. Winchester prepared elaborate dinners every night for 13 people. She set 13 places at the main dining table. 13 plates, 13 utensils, 13 glasses. Then she served food on each plate. But she was the only person who ate. The other 12 places remained untouched throughout dinner. When I asked about this during my first week, she explained calmly, I dine with my guests every night. Those you cannot see are always present. Archived food purchase records and local suppliers' records confirm that Sarah Winchester ordered food quantities significantly greater than necessary for a single person or even for a house with small staff. Merriman described another disturbing ritual. Every Friday, Mrs. Winchester performed what she called the count. She walked through the entire mansion counting windows. There were more than 10,000 windows on the property, and she insisted on counting them all personally every week. This process took approximately 4 hours. When I asked why she did it, she told me, windows are eyes. Spirits can see through them. I must ensure they are all present, that none have been opened from the other side. Official inventories conducted after Sarah's death confirmed the presence of approximately 10,000 windows on the property, though the exact count varied depending on how window was defined, as many opened to interior walls or had been sealed. By 1913, the phenomena at the Winchester mansion had reached such notoriety that they began to attract the attention of paranormal investigators. Historical archives document that at least 2 different groups of psychic investigators requested permission to study the property. Harry Price, the famous British paranormal investigator, whose correspondence is archived at the University of London Archives, wrote a letter to Sarah Winchester on April 8, 1913 requesting permission to conduct a scientific investigation of the reported phenomena. Sarah rejected the request in a brief but revealing response, also archived. The phenomena of my home are not subjects of scientific study. They are realities I live with daily. I do not need strangers to validate what I experience. The spirits that inhabit here are my guests, not specimens for investigation. However, Sarah did allow occasional visits from trusted mediums and spiritualists. Visitor records, partially preserved in family documents donated to archives, show visits from prominent figures of the American spiritualist movement of the early 20th century. One of these visits is particularly well documented. In October 1914, Sarah Winchester received a group of 3 mediums from the American Society for Psychical Research in Boston. Although they were not allowed to conduct a formal investigation, they did provide observations that were recorded in the Society's bulletin, now archived. The lead medium, a woman named Clara Rothstein, wrote, "The Winchester Mansion is not simply a haunted house in the traditional sense. It is a nexus, a convergence point between our world and the next. Mrs. Winchester is not building out of fear, though certainly fear is present. She is building out of obligation. She has made some kind of pact, some kind of agreement with the forces that inhabit that place. The endless construction is the price of that pact." Construction workers also began to report more direct and terrifying phenomena. Labor incident records archived in company books document multiple cases of workers who suffered inexplicable accidents. In July 1915, a carpenter named Daniel Foster fell from a ladder in strange circumstances. His statement to insurance investigators, archived in the insurance company records, describes, "I was on the 4th rung of the ladder, completely stable. Suddenly, I felt unequivocally that someone was pushing the ladder from the base. The ladder tilted and I fell. When I got up and looked, there was no one nearby. I was working alone in that room. There was no air current. There was no tremor. Something or someone deliberately pushed that ladder." Foster suffered a fractured wrist and never returned to work on the property. Medical records from the period between 1914 and 1918 document 8 similar incidents of workers who suffered injuries in circumstances they described as impossible or inexplicable. The insurance company covering the property, in archived correspondence, expressed concern about the unusually high rate of claims coming from the Winchester Mansion. By 1918, Sarah Winchester had been building for 34 years. She was 79 years old, but construction showed no signs of slowing. Employment records show that she maintained between 12 and 15 carpenters working simultaneously, still in 24-hour shifts. Newspaper archives from that period reveal a change in how the press covered the mansion. What had been mocking curiosity in previous decades had become something darker. Articles used words like disturbing, sinister, and cursed to describe the property. A particularly notable article from the San Jose Evening News of October 30, 1918, published on Halloween, described, "The Winchester Mansion stands as a monument to obsession, fear, and perhaps to forces we do not fully understand. For 34 years, construction has not ceased. For 34 years, hammers have sounded day and night. And for 34 years, those who work there have reported experiences that defy rational explanation. Whatever the truth behind Mrs. Winchester's endless construction, it is clear that it is driven by something more powerful than simple eccentricity of a wealthy widow." Records document that Sarah Winchester lived her final years in almost complete isolation from the outside world. She rarely left the property. She rejected practically all visits except from her trusted mediums and her personal physician. Domestic staff rotated constantly, unable to bear the atmosphere of the house for extended periods. But Sarah never stopped building. She never stopped adding rooms, hallways, staircases. She never stopped creating her architectural labyrinth intended to confuse the dead she believed pursued her. Because in Sarah Winchester's mind, stopping meant death. Stopping meant the spirits would finally reach her. Stopping meant facing the vengeance of all those killed by the rifles that bore her family's name. And so the hammers continued sounding. Year after year. Decade after decade. An endless concert of construction driven by one woman's terror of the ghosts of her blood-stained fortune. The archives document 38 years of this architectural horror. But the final chapters were yet to come. The desperate attempts to find a solution, and the inevitable end that no amount of construction could prevent. As Sarah Winchester aged, records document that her obsession with protecting herself from spirits intensified, but also became more sophisticated. It was no longer simply chaotic construction. She had begun to incorporate specific elements she believed had protective power against the supernatural. Detailed inventories of the mansion conducted after her death, archived in Santa Clara County records, reveal a fascinating and disturbing pattern. Sarah Winchester had incorporated the number 13 into practically every aspect of construction. Official documents enumerate 13 bathrooms, 13 windows and multiple rooms, staircases with 13 steps, chandeliers with 13 arms, 13 panels and decorative walls, 13 squares and specific stained glass windows. The inventory notes, the repetition of the number 13 is so consistent that it cannot be coincidental. It was clearly a deliberate architectural choice. Historians have documented that in the spiritualist numerology of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the number 13 was considered powerful for communicating with the dead, but also for controlling them. Sarah apparently believed that incorporating this number repeatedly in her architecture would give her power over the spirits that pursued her. Mary Merriman, whose extensive interviews were cited earlier, provided additional details about Sarah's protective practices in her series of articles from 1918. Mrs. Winchester did not just build rooms. She performed consecration rituals for each new space. When a room was completed, she spent an entire night there alone, performing some kind of ceremony. The next day she declared whether the room was safe, or if it should be modified or sealed. Construction records show that between 1916 and 1920, Sarah ordered 22 additional rooms permanently sealed, beyond the 30 sealed after the earthquake. Workers declared that these rooms were sealed not due to structural damage, but because Sarah believed that the spirits had claimed those spaces. Thomas Allen, carpenter employed between 1915 and 1922, declared in an archived interview from the San Jose Mercury News of 1927, "There were rooms we sealed because Mrs. Winchester said they were no longer safe. When we asked what that meant, she never gave detailed explanations. She simply ordered them sealed and we obeyed." Some of those rooms had been completed just weeks before. New, impeccable, completely functional. But something happened during her nightly sessions that convinced her they should be permanently closed. Records also document that Sarah began consulting with multiple mediums simultaneously, seeking confirmation or contradiction of the messages she received. Archived correspondence shows letters exchanged with at least 8 different mediums between 1915 and 1922. A particularly revealing letter from a medium named Sophia Merrick, dated February 14, 1917 and archived in the California Historical Society collection, advised, "Dear Sarah, the spirits have communicated to me that your construction has succeeded in confusing them, but has also enraged them. They are trapped in your labyrinth, unable to find you but also unable to leave. They suggest you must create specific exits, passages that allow them to leave the house voluntarily. Portals to the afterlife that do not require them to find you first." Architectural records show that immediately after receiving this letter, Sarah ordered the construction of multiple doors to nowhere, doors that open to vertical drops of several stories or directly to exterior walls. The final inventory documents 47 of these impossible doors. James Perkins, in his last interview before his death in 1923, explained, "Mrs. Winchester believed these doors that led nowhere in our world led somewhere in the spirit world. They were escape portals for trapped ghosts. She ordered us to install them carefully, with specific ceremonies during their installation. At midnight, she blessed each new impossible door, inviting the spirits to use them to leave their architectural prison." Archived medical records from Dr. Carl Myers, Sarah's personal physician from 1917 until her death, reveal growing concerns about her mental and physical state. In private notes dated August 22, 1918, now archived in the County Historical Medical Collection, Dr. Myers wrote, "Mrs. Winchester maintains remarkable lucidity for her age of 79 years. However, her belief system about spirits is completely immutable. It is not dementia in the clinical sense. It is rather a perfectly organized belief structure but based on premises most would consider irrational. She functions normally in all other aspects of her life." Dr. Myers continued, "I have suggested multiple times that she stop continuous construction, that she rest, that she find peace. She responds with perfect calm that stopping would be her death. She does not speak metaphorically. She literally believes that the day construction ceases, the spirits will finally reach her and claim her life as payment for the deaths caused by Winchester rifles. From her perspective, endless construction is not madness. It is survival." Archived financial records show that by 1920, Sarah had spent approximately $5,500,000 on continuous construction of the mansion, equivalent to more than $80 million current dollars according to economic historians. Continued income from her stake in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company guaranteed she would never run out of funds. But money could not buy what Sarah truly needed: peace of mind. Visitor records document that in 1919, Sarah received one of the West Coast's most famous mediums, a man named William Henry Thompson, known professionally as the Oakland Seer. Thompson had gained notoriety for supposedly predicting the 1906 earthquake 3 weeks before it occurred. Thompson's visit to the Winchester mansion is documented in multiple sources. The Oakland Tribune published an article on March 12, 1919 describing the visit. Renowned medium William Henry Thompson was invited this week to the mysterious Winchester mansion of San Jose. Mr. Thompson spent 3 full days on the property, conducting extensive sessions with Mrs. Winchester. Upon leaving, he appeared visibly disturbed and declined to make public comments about his experiences there. However, Thompson did provide a private comment in a letter to a fellow medium, Arthur Conan Doyle, who besides being the author of Sherlock Holmes was a devoted spiritualist. This letter, now archived in the Conan Doyle collection at the British Library, was dated March 20, 1919. Thompson wrote, "My dear Arthur, I have just returned from the most extraordinary and disturbing experience of my career as a medium. The Winchester Mansion is not simply a haunted house. It is a complete ecosystem of spiritual activity. For 3 consecutive nights, I conducted sessions with Mrs. Winchester. On each occasion, multiple entities manifested with a clarity I have never experienced in other locations. But most disturbing, these entities do not seem to seek revenge against Mrs. Winchester specifically. They are trapped, confused by the impossible architecture, unable to find exit. The house has become a prison for both the living and the dead. I advised Mrs. Winchester to stop construction, to simplify the structure, to allow the spirits to find peace. She absolutely rejected my advice. I fear for her soul." Records show that Sarah also attempted more practical solutions. In 1920, she hired a professional architect from San Francisco, a man named Frederick Meyer, to inspect the structure and suggest safety improvements. Meyer's report, archived in San Jose City records, is one of the most fascinating documents about the mansion. Meyer wrote on April 15, 1920, "I have been hired to assess the structure known as Winchester Mansion. I must report that this is not architecture in any conventional sense. It is an organism that has grown according to some internal logic that defies known structural principles. There are staircases that end in ceilings, doors that open to walls, windows installed in floors, rooms built within rooms without access. Yet, miraculously, the structure remains standing. It is architecturally impossible, and yet it exists." Meyer continued, "When I asked Mrs. Winchester about design logic, she explained that each element was instructed by the spirits during her nightly communications. I explained that from a structural engineering perspective, many elements are unnecessary or counterproductive. She responded that from a spiritual perspective, each element is absolutely necessary. She ordered me not to alter anything. My professional recommendation: this structure should not be modified by conventional architects. It follows rules we do not understand." Workers documented that Sarah also attempted traditional religious methods in addition to her spiritualist practices. Parish records from the Catholic Church of San Jose, archived in diocesan archives, show that in 1918, Sarah requested that a priest bless the property. Father Michael O'Connor, who performed the blessing on July 14, 1918, wrote in the parish register, "At Mrs. Winchester's request, I blessed her residence according to the Catholic rite of home blessing. However, I must note that Mrs. Winchester is not a practicing Catholic and made clear that this blessing was complementary to her spiritualist practices, not a replacement. The house presents an atmosphere I can only describe as spiritually dense. I felt an oppressive presence I have not experienced in other home blessings. I performed the ritual completely, but left with doubts about its effectiveness in that particular place." Records also document a notable incident in 1919 suggesting that Sarah briefly considered the possibility of abandoning the mansion completely. Archived real estate records show that she made inquiries about properties in Southern California, specifically in the Los Angeles area. Grace Watkins, a Los Angeles real estate agent, wrote in her memoirs published in 1943, now archived, "In 1919, I was contacted by representatives of Mrs. Sarah Winchester inquiring about available properties in Beverly Hills. I traveled to San Jose to meet with her personally. She explained she was considering starting over in a place without history, without connections to the past. We spent 2 days exploring options. But on the 3rd day she informed me she had changed her mind. When I asked why, she simply said, 'The spirits will not allow me to leave. This is my prison as much as theirs. We are bound to this place together.'" Dr. Meyer's medical records from 1920 and 1921 document gradual deterioration in Sarah's physical health. though her mind remained sharp. Notes from January 8, 1921 indicate, Mrs. Winchester, now 82 years old, shows signs of severe arthritis and general weakness associated with advanced age. I have recommended she reduce her nocturnal activities and get more rest. She insists that her midnight sessions are non-negotiable. They are, according to her, the only thing keeping her alive. Workers documented that even as Sarah became physically frail, she never allowed construction to stop. Employment records from 1921 and 1922 show she maintained teams of 12 carpenters working continuously, though she herself could rarely supervise the work in person as she had done in earlier years. Instead, she continued giving detailed instructions based on her nightly communications with spirits. Workers received each morning written lists of specific tasks. Build a window in this exact location. Create a staircase with exactly 13 steps in this room. Seal this hallway but keep this other one open. Robert Harrison, one of the last carpenters to work for Sarah, declared in an archived interview from 1935, "During my last 2 years working there, Mrs. Winchester rarely left her private quarters. But every morning, without fail, we found detailed instructions waiting for us. The instructions were precise, specific, sometimes puzzling. Build a door that opens inward instead of outward. Install a window 2 inches from the floor. Create a closet without a door." But payment was prompt and generous, so we did what we were ordered without questioning. Records document that Sarah also increased her efforts to document her spiritual communications. House inventories after her death revealed multiple personal diaries where Sarah meticulously recorded the messages she believed she received from spirits during her nightly sessions. Unfortunately, these diaries were destroyed by her niece and heir, Marion Marriott, who according to archived legal documents believed they were too personal and potentially embarrassing for family memory. Only fragments cited in legal documents and newspaper articles survive in public archives. A fragment cited in the San Jose Mercury Herald of September 12, 1922, published a week after Sarah's death, includes a diary entry dated May 3, 1922. "The spirits are calmer now. Construction has soothed them. They no longer scream as frequently. But they warn that if construction ceases, they will return with renewed fury. I must continue. There is no rest for me in this life. Perhaps only in death will I find peace, when I can finally join them in their realm instead of keeping them at bay in mine." Records from the summer of 1922 document that Sarah's health deteriorated rapidly. Dr. Meyer's notes from August 15 indicate, "Mrs. Winchester is visibly weakening. She has days or weeks left, not months. I have suggested she make peace with her family, that she put her affairs in order. She insists that her only affairs are with the spirits, and that those affairs will never truly be in order." During her final days, according to archived staff testimonies, Sarah ordered specific accelerations in certain construction projects. It was as if she knew her time was running out and was desperate to complete particular elements before her death. Construction records from September 1922 show urgent orders to complete 3 specific rooms, seal 2 particular passages, and build 1 last staircase with exactly 13 steps. Workers later declared that Sarah seemed to be following increasingly urgent instructions from her spiritual communications. But no amount of construction, no amount of rituals, no amount of communication with mediums could prevent the inevitable. On September 4, 1922, Sarah Winchester suffered sudden deterioration. Dr. Myers was called an emergency. His medical report, archived in county records, indicates, "I arrived at 10 at night. Mrs. Winchester was conscious but extremely weak. She asked me how much time she had left. I told her honestly probably hours, not days. She nodded as if she had been expecting this confirmation. Her last audible words before losing consciousness were, 'The hammers must continue. If they stop, they will come.'" At 4:35 in the morning on September 5, 1922, Sarah Lockwood Pardee Winchester died in her bedroom in the mansion she had been building for 38 years. She was 83 years old. And at the exact moment of her death, according to multiple archived worker testimonies, all hammers stopped. After 38 years of continuous noise, the Winchester mansion finally fell silent. But the mystery was far from over. Sarah Lockwood Winchester's official death certificate, archived in California State Vital Records, documents, date of death, September 5, 1922. Time, 4:35 in the morning. Cause heart failure. Location, Winchester Mansion, San Jose, California. Age, 83 years. But what happened immediately after her death was documented in testimonies revealing how profoundly endless construction had defined not only Sarah's life, but that of everyone who worked on the property. John Hansen, construction foreman who had worked for Sarah for 27 years, provided detailed testimony to the San Jose Mercury Herald on September 7, 1922. I was supervising the night shift when Dr. Myers came out of Mrs. Winchester's quarters at approximately 4:40 in the morning. He informed us she had passed. At that exact moment, as if they had received an invisible signal, all workers dropped their tools simultaneously. After 38 years of continuous hammering, the silence that followed was deafening. Several of the men began to cry. They were not crying simply for the death of an employer. They were crying because they knew something had ended. Something larger than simply a job. Estate executor records, archived in Santa Clara County legal documents, document that Sarah's niece, Marion Marriott, born Merriman, inherited the complete property and all remaining fortune, estimated at approximately $5 million, equivalent to more than 75 million current dollars. Sarah's will, dated March 15, 1920 and publicly archived, contained an extraordinary clause. It is my express wish that construction of my residence continue after my death according to plans I have left in my private documents. However, I recognize this may not be financially viable or desirable for my heir. Therefore, I leave this decision to her discretion. Marion Marriott made her decision immediately. Records document that she ordered permanent cessation of all construction the same day as Sarah's death. Workers were dismissed, paid their final wages, and the property was closed for assessment. What estate executors discovered when inventorying the mansion was meticulously documented in official reports revealing the true magnitude of Sarah Winchester's creation. The official inventory, completed over 6 weeks between September and October 1922 and archived in county records, documents 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 chimneys, 40 staircases, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, 3 elevators, 2 functional, 1 that rose only 1 floor, multiple basements connected by labyrinthine tunnels, and approximately 2,000 closets and storage spaces. But the numbers did not capture the true strangeness. The inventory includes detailed descriptions: staircase that ascends 9 steps, turns 90 degrees, and ends abruptly against ceiling. Door on second floor that opens to vertical drop of 4 meters without balcony. Window installed in floor of east room on 3rd floor. Room of 2 square meters without windows or visible doors, accessible only through adjacent closet. Hallway that makes 7 90-degree turns in 15 meters, returning to starting point. Architectural evaluators, whose reports are archived, expressed professional perplexity. Arthur Johnstone, architect hired to assess the structure, wrote on October 23, 1922, "I have examined buildings during 30 years of professional career. I have never encountered anything comparable to this structure. It is not simply eccentric. It is architecturally impossible according to conventional principles. There are sections where support beams support nothing. There are walls that bear no weight but are triple thickness. There are rooms built with such precision that joints are invisible, and rooms where boards are deliberately misaligned. There is no master plan because there was never intention to create coherence. Each element was built independently, and yet, miraculously, the structure remains standing." Legal records document that Marion Marriott faced a difficult decision about what to do with the property. Maintenance costs were astronomical. Property taxes were significant. And the house was completely impractical as a residence. Family meeting minutes, archived in legal documents, show there were discussions about demolishing the structure completely. But public interest in the mystery mansion was already considerable, and local entrepreneurs saw commercial potential. Archived commercial records document that in 1923, Marion Marriott sold the property to a group of investors led by John H. Brown for $135,000. The sale contract, publicly archived, specified, "The property will be preserved as tourist attraction and museum, maintaining its unique architectural condition as legacy of Mrs. Sarah Winchester." The Winchester Mystery House, as it was officially renamed, opened to the public in 1923. Newspaper archives document it was an immediate success. Americans, fascinated by ghost stories and the paranormal, traveled from across the country to see the impossible mansion. But new owners and tour guide staff began to report phenomena suggesting Sarah Winchester was not the only presence that had remained in the house. Winchester Mystery House employee records, archived in company documents now publicly available, document multiple incidents between 1923 and 1930. Margaret Foster, one of the first tour guides, wrote in an incident report dated March 14, 1924. "While conducting a tour through the West Wing, I clearly heard the sound of hammering coming from the floor above. I thought perhaps they had hired maintenance workers without informing me. When the tour ended, I investigated. There were no workers. There were no tools. But 3 tour visitors had also heard the hammering clearly. It was not collective imagination. Records document dozens of similar reports during the early years of operation as a museum. Construction sounds when no workers were present. Doors that opened and closed by themselves. Sudden temperature changes in specific rooms. Apparitions of figures that disappeared when observed directly. San Jose City archives contain correspondence from 1925 where museum owners requested permission to conduct formal paranormal investigations on the property. Permission was granted, and between 1926 and 1928, at least 5 different groups of psychic investigators studied the mansion. The most detailed report was produced by the American Society for Psychical Research in 1928, now archived in the Society's collection. The report concludes, the Winchester Mansion presents levels of anomalous paranormal activity consistent with historical descriptions. Multiple investigators experienced inexplicable auditory phenomena, thermal variations without apparent cause, and on 3 separate occasions, brief visual apparitions. While we cannot conclusively affirm these phenomena are evidence of spiritual presence, neither can we explain them through conventional natural causes. Archived maintenance records document continuing peculiarities. Maintenance workers hired to preserve the structure consistently reported strange experiences. Tools that disappeared and reappeared in different locations. Sections of the house that seemed abnormally cold even in summer. Sensations of being watched when working alone in sealed rooms. Frank Wilson, maintenance supervisor between 1932 and 1948, declared in an archived interview from 1950, "I worked in that house for 16 years. I never got completely used to it. There were perfectly normal days. And there were days where I swore someone else was in the house with me, though I knew I was completely alone. The sealed rooms were particularly unsettling. Sometimes I heard sounds coming from rooms that had been sealed for 30 years. Knocking, scratching, as if something were trying to get out." Historical records document that the Winchester Mansion survived another significant earthquake in 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake of magnitude 6.9. Structural damage reports, archived in city records, document minor damage to chimneys and walls. Notably, the main structure remained intact despite the earthquake's violence. The eccentric construction, with its multiple supports and unconventional weight distribution, may paradoxically have contributed to its seismic resilience. Academic archives document numerous studies about the mansion from historical, architectural, and psychological perspectives. Historian Mary Jo Ignafo published Captive of the Labyrinth in 2010, based extensively on previously inaccessible archived documents. Her research confirmed many of the documented elements of Sarah Winchester's story, though it also questioned some of the more sensationalist narratives that had developed over decades. Ignafo argues in her book, based on financial records and archived correspondence, Sarah Winchester was not simply an insane widow terrified by ghosts. She was an extraordinarily intelligent woman who had lost everything she loved and desperately sought meaning and control in a world that had taken away her purpose. Endless construction was therapy as much as protection. It was how she maintained her sanity as much as how she believed she kept spirits at bay. Archaeological records from excavations conducted on the property in 2002, archived in California Parks Department documents, revealed something fascinating: multiple layers of construction buried beneath the current structure. Sarah had built, demolished, and rebuilt entire sections of the house multiple times. The archaeological stratum showed at least 7 different construction phases in some areas. Winchester Mystery House visitor records document that more than 12 million people have visited the property since it opened to the public in 1923. It is one of Northern California's most popular tourist attractions. But beyond tourism, it has become a cultural symbol. Popular culture archives document hundreds of references to the Winchester Mansion in films, television series, books, and other media. In 2018, a horror film called Winchester, starring Helen Mirren as Sarah Winchester, premiered, introducing the story to a new global generation. But fundamental questions remain definitively unanswered, documented in academic debates archived at multiple universities. Was Sarah Winchester truly tormented by spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles? Historical records confirm she firmly believed so. Testimonies from dozens of workers and visitors document inexplicable phenomena. But direct evidence of supernatural presence remains, as always, elusive. Was endless construction a manifestation of mental illness? Medical records suggest Sarah was mentally competent in all aspects except her belief system about spirits. She functioned normally, managed complex finances, and maintained limited but appropriate social relationships. Or was construction simply how a brilliant woman devastated by loss found purpose in an era that offered no meaningful roles for wealthy women without family? Historians argue convincingly that construction gave Sarah control, identity, and meaning in a life that otherwise would have been empty. Records from modern psychological studies about the Winchester case, published in archived academic journals, suggest the truth is probably complex. Sarah Winchester was a woman of remarkable intelligence, profound trauma, unlimited resources, and spiritualist beliefs consistent with her era. The intersection of these factors produced 38 years of architectural construction that defies simple categorization. Contemporary Winchester Mystery House records document that current staff still occasionally report inexplicable phenomena. A maintenance report from 2018, publicly available, mentions multiple alarm systems activated in sealed rooms without apparent cause. Security cameras occasionally capture visual anomalies that technicians cannot explain. Night cleaning staff prefer to work in pairs in certain sections of the house. The Blue Room, where Sarah conducted her midnight sessions, remains part of the tour but is closed to direct public access. Records indicate this restriction is as much for historical preservation as because staff report that specific room presents the greatest concentration of unusual incidents. Scientific archives document multiple attempts to explain the mansion's impossible architecture through modern structural analysis. Engineering studies from 2015, archived in architecture journals, confirm the structure should not be as stable as it is. Weight distribution is illogical. Supports are in wrong places. Continuous modifications should have compromised structural integrity. And yet, the mansion remains standing after more than 130 years, having survived 2 massive earthquakes. San Jose census records document that the area around the former Winchester property has developed extensively. What was open countryside in 1884 is now dense urban suburb. But the mansion remains an architectural anachronism, a physical reminder of a different era and of a woman whose fear, pain, and obsession manifested in wood, brick, and glass. Genealogical archives document that the Winchester family line became extinct. Sarah had no more children after Annie. Her husband William was an only child. The Winchester surname, at least this specific branch associated with the weapons, ended with Sarah's death. But her legacy endures in the 160 rooms of her impossible labyrinth. Final historical records pose a question that remains unanswered. Did Sarah Winchester find in death the peace she never found in life? The spiritual documents she consulted promised that continuous construction would protect her from vengeful spirits. She built for 38 years. She never voluntarily stopped. Only death stopped the hammers. If her belief system was correct, then on September 5, 1922 at 4:35 in the morning, Sarah Winchester finally faced the spirits she had been avoiding for nearly 4 decades. Records cannot document what happened in that moment. There are no testimonies from the afterlife. There is no evidence of what occurs when a woman who built a prison for ghosts finally comes face to face with those she tried to contain. But archives document this. After 140 years, the Winchester mansion remains. 160 rooms of impossible architecture. 2,000 doors, some leading somewhere, others leading nowhere. 10,000 windows, some looking outward, others looking inward. And according to consistent testimonies archived over a century, occasionally, late at night when the museum is closed and the house is silent, some hear the distant echo of hammers. As if construction had never truly ended. As if Sarah Winchester, even in death, were still building. As if the labyrinth she created to confuse the dead had become her own eternal prison. Archives document the facts. Testimonies document the experiences. Records document the history. But some mysteries transcend documentation. And the Winchester mansion, after more than a century, guards its deepest secrets as jealously as Sarah Winchester guarded her life from the spirits she believed pursued her. The hammering ceased on September 5, 1922. Or did it truly cease? That question remains unanswered in the archives. And perhaps some questions must remain unanswered.